Welcome to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. I'm Dr. Rowan Adler, Dr. Kathy Greenberg, my esteemed host for over 20 years. We've been doing this podcast, and we always are trying to bring you some tips, some tools to help you be your best. We define that as being in the top 10%. What can you do a little differently? Is there anything that you can do that difference will make a difference? We're going to talk about that from Gregory Bateson. That It goes way back, the difference that makes a difference. So that's these tips, these tools that we are trying to share with you when we interview our great guests. Today, we're going to have Dr. Josh Davis, and the title of this is The Secret to Changing Minds, Including Your Own. And NLP, Neuro-Linguistics Programming, and the Science of Positive Change. So NLP, we're going to take a deeper dive into that. It's been around for a long time. We're going to ask Josh Davis about that. And then he has a book playing on Gregory Bateson's The Difference That Makes a Difference. He's holding it up right now. NLP and the Science of Positive Change. And so I'm excited about that. I've studied NLP in the past and want to see what Josh can bring to us. And some of the aspects that we talk about, why is this such a critical time? Well, one, we have more emotional distress than ever before. You know, all the literature is saying we're more anxious, we're more depressed, we're more overwhelmed, and we need more emotional support. That's number one. Number two, we're not as self-aware as we think we are. You know, some of the data saying we all think, oh yeah, I know my strengths. Oh yeah, I know my weaknesses. When the reality comes, and this is from Tara Urick, 15% of us are really self-aware. So some of this in our show is trying to help you be more self-aware. And what also helps, number three, we're on autopilot. If you stay on autopilot, you stay average. We talk about that in every show. We're all on autopilot for all the right reasons, but not necessarily the best results. And the last part of this, whether you're a coach, whether you're a leader, is can we take time with everything swirling around us, the turbulence that Kathy and I talk about, to have slow thinking. Coaching is slow thinking. Leadership is slow thinking. And so with that, Kat, welcome to the show.
Hey, Relly, I'm really excited today to have this conversation with Josh. And again, you know, as you were saying, I'm also a fan of NLP. I have taken courses in that and certainly really believe in a lot of what we do, especially with regard to NLP, is using the power of empathy. And we know
Yeah.
that the power of empathy is really important when it comes to leadership. We know that leaders high in empathy versus low in empathy impacted work engagement by 76%. And those, you know, who are really good at this are going to help others get better. You know, one of the things we want to talk a little bit about today with Josh will be when emotions are heightened, you know, how do we manage them? How can we get a better understanding of how emotions affect us and what makes us all capable of an emotional brilliance performance using some of his tips and tools and the strategies we love to bring everybody on our weekly show. So let's get started. I'm excited.
Okay.
Let's jump in.
Yeah, I'm going to say a couple things as a highlight. So we know from our 6 seconds that global emotional intelligence scores have declined
That's right.
for 4 consecutive years. This is another way of saying it, is this emotional recession. And the last thing I'll say, because Josh is going to help us change, that may be you, from the Center for Creative Leadership, which has been around forever, removing one negative energy tie on your team. We all have that one negative energy person, is like adding 4 positive. How are you going to use what Josh is saying to us today to maybe help that person that's an energy drain, Kat, that we like to talk about?
Yep.
Do you want to, Kat, you want to introduce Josh?
Sure, I'd love to. So Josh Davis, PhD, is the international best-selling author of 2 Awesome Hours and a certified trainer and master practitioner of NLP. He earned his PhD from Columbia University, where he studied psychology and neuroscience, two of my favorites. He's the founder and director of the Science-Based Leadership Institute. Previously, Josh was on the faculty at Barnard College of Columbia University, and he's held senior positions at the NeuroLeadership and other leadership development institutes. He specializes in applying NLP. Of course, for those of you who don't know what that is, that's neuro-linguistic programming. We're going to talk about that today. And the lessons from science to such topics as productivity, public speaking, communications, and our favorite topic today, which is going to be behavior change. His writing has appeared in Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, and leading business and academic journals, and his contributions have been covered by various major news sources, including the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and the Times in London. For more information on Josh, you can reach him at southbrooklyn@gmail.com. I'll say that again, southbrooklyn@gmail.com. And his website is www.joshdavisphd.com. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here. There were several very interesting provocations in that introduction. So the secret to changing minds, and so probably some people are wondering what's the secret, right? And let's get into that. And I'd actually like to give that away relatively early, and then I think people will see like, oh, wait a second, I know it, but now let me show me how to do that, right? Then secondly, you're talking about empathy. And I don't know if you've ever profiled or know about Dr. Jamil Zaki. He's a neuroscience professor at Stanford
Right.
and a couple of like really popular books. And he talks about how empathy actually is something learnable, right? And I
Right.
think a lot of what we'll talk about today are ways that you can very, very quickly get better at it, right? And it very much is. And then, of course, your work with emotional intelligence, and so a couple of different ways that we can
Okay.
master our own emotions. A number of things out there, and then, of course, the specific focus on what do you do with a person who's challenging and so forth, and your own stuck emotions. So we'll have lots of rich stuff to
All
talk
right.
about. I can give people a definition of NLP too,
Yeah.
that I think is helpful for understanding why it's helpful. But
Yeah, let's get
yeah.
into all that. But let me first give your other website, and then I'm going to ask you kind of some of your key influences. So for your book, the differences that make a difference, NLP, the letters NLPdifference.com.
hmm
And so we like to start off. So who's been some of your key influences, as we move forward, a little bit of your background.
Oh, so um, there's the influences that people may have heard of, like, for example, the title of this book. Oh, by the way, since we were in touch, it has become a USA Today bestseller. So that's great.
Wow.
Yeah, so this one. So the title of this book is a reference to a famous phrase from Dr. Gregory Bateson. He and the other people who were studied to create NLP have been great influences on me. So, founder of hypnotherapy, Dr. Milton Erickson, and Virginia Satir, family therapist, and Fritz Perls and Gestalt.
Uh-huh.
So those people. But actually, this is less of someone you can go and observe, but I think it helps uh, kind of show the power of it. My own parents are had until they retired a family therapy institute, and uh, so this is actually this is a moment to kind of give my definition of what NLP is because the story is blended with
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Okay.
Should I do that? Okay.
Yeah.
So we're it's the 1970s, and there are all these new psychotherapies coming online.
All
Uh,
right.
And what many people are noticing in the psychotherapy world is that you've got, with hypnotherapy, family therapy, gestalt therapy, cognitive therapy, what later became known as CBT, as DBT and ACT and so forth, right? That people are getting results so much faster. Change is happening faster than many people thought possible before, and it's lasting. So how do you get change quickly and in a lasting way, right? This is sort of in the world of psychotherapy, people who are doing change work all day long, every change you can imagine, personal, health, professional, family dynamics, every kind of change you can imagine all day long. How are they getting changes quickly and in a lasting way? Right. And so this is kind of the question that's on the mind of so many people in the field, including my parents at the time, right? They're in this field of family therapy, and uh, it's my my mom she has two little kids at this point. This is like 1979, and she wants to study what's going on, especially with Dr. Milton Erickson,
Oh,
hypnotherapy progenitor. And she can't go and do it because she got two little kids, right? So she can't go just sit there and watch him and copy him.
right,
And it's not
right.
like we had the internet, right? We didn't have all these video resources. You just had to travel and observe and try to copy, right? And this is what many people tried to do. And along comes this linguistics professor and a partner of his. They decide, let's go and use our tools from linguistics to see if we can understand the
Right.
form, not just the content. Can we understand the signal from the noise, the patterns, the language patterns these therapists are using, and not just one of them, many of them, right? And can we identify maybe the nonverbal communication patterns, but looking at the patterns, not the specific content, and see if we can identify it. And they did a great job. They called it neuro-linguistic programming, and they taught it, and therapists have been using it forever, eventually coaches too. People have applied it in marketing and sales and so forth. You've heard of Tony Robbins. He says it's the most powerful stuff he knows about, right? And what I want to do is to bring it to people, everyone, day to day. You don't have to have any background to really be able to understand it
Hmm.
and make use of it. And 50 years on, while there wasn't research at the time, if you look at any tool within NLP, there is research to support it now. And because I have that background as well, I can put the two together. And so in the book, that's something that I've done, is Greg and I worked together on the book, but the science side was much more me because that's my background, right? So how does the science actually support what's here? And those things that aren't supported, we didn't include, but there's very little that isn't supported. So at this point, we want people these things are so powerful to make change very
Hmm.
quickly, and I can say a little bit more about why
Yeah.
that is, but they're so powerful and people really can use it. And in the chapter in the book, what we've done is to take, for each tool that we offer, it's some reflection questions, and then if you reflect on them, you're using the tool, and then you're going to be able to use it again. And of course you can go deeper with NLP, but you really can. So those were my biggest influences then.
Uh-huh.
That's how I learned about this stuff, and then I was just fascinated. And so I've been now teaching it for 25 years, well, studying or teaching it for 25 years,
Wow.
as well as getting into the science separately. And now I finally merged them.
Wow. That's a lot there to unpack, but it tells me that you have such a deep knowledge and strength in the psychology behind what you're writing about, and a lot of beautiful people there that you just described. When you think about NLP and how it's different from other self-help or communication methods, what comes to mind for you, Josh, that you can share with the audience?
So the kind of the core idea of NLP that everything revolves around is that no matter what, if you're trying to change yourself or if you're trying to help somebody else to change, and I say help them to change because you can't make someone change and wouldn't want to, right? But in either case, whatever's happening now before the change, there is a world in which that behavior makes really good sense.
Hmm.
And NLP helps you quickly dive in to discover what is that world. And when you do, that's when you can quickly identify the difference that will make the difference for you in your particular context, which
Yeah.
will be different for everyone, but it's the same process each time.
Yeah. So
And so, yeah.
what's great about this is, just the history, and just to reiterate what you said, because both Kathy and I, studied it. Virginia Satir, family therapist, Milton Erickson, famous hypnotherapist, and then Fritz Perls. I did a lot of training early in my career, watched all the films with Fritz Perls and the Gestalt, but it's that integration. And then, like you also mentioned, Tony Robbins just kind of took it and kind of, turned it into his own thing, but really the same kind of basis. So we want to mention your co-author, Greg Promushkin. You guys have different backgrounds, and maybe just say a little bit about that, and then we'll get into kind of all the
Yeah.
key tools.
So is
You know what?
Oh,
You
sorry.
know what? I was just going to say, I have a feeling that this is going to be a really rich conversation. And I know that we got to go to a quick break. So I don't want to take away from what Josh, you want to get into here. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll start exactly where we left off. So don't go away. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News. We're talking with Dr. Josh Davis about his book, The Difference That Makes a Difference, playing on Gregory Bateson's term. He has a co-author, Greg Promushkin, who has a different background. And maybe say a little bit about you and Greg, and so why this book, why now?
Yeah. So I think the differences between Greg and I really help to highlight a couple of the very useful tools from NLP because we're very different, right? Greg is kind of like a gruff, like trial lawyer, right? He's a different personality, different background, different kind of like, um, we have different worldviews in many ways, and it has been an amazing collaboration, and we both love it and continue to want to find other ways to do things. I give Greg a lot of the credit. He gives me a lot of credit. So there's something we've done there. We've both actually tried to use NLP to model each other's collaboration skills, to learn how the other one does it so we can do more of it. Um, because remember, I mentioned this idea of there's a world in which someone's behavior makes sense. This is a foundational idea in NLP.
Right.
And because NLP has tools to understand that world, not only can you help someone change, if someone else has a skill you want, you can learn to take it on much more quickly. If somebody on your team has a skill you want, you can learn to bring that to others because you can really unpack what are the key pieces, the beliefs, the capabilities, what you do when you get stuck, how you think about yourself, all these things that make the skill. Anyway, so Greg is a trial lawyer, and he likes to talk about how, his role is to dumb things down and my role was to like be the expert, but I didn't see it that way. But the fact that we even had these different ways of talking about it. So he showed up to take a class that I was teaching on public speaking, where I've applied NLP to public speaking. I love public speaking, and it's about something that it's about how do you enjoy public speaking. And the reason I mention that is because in one of the things in NLP is you can really learn how to control your emotional state or choose your emotional state. And so how do you actually show up and enjoy something like public speaking, not just get through it, which is the typical approach, right? So I just want to plant the seed that these kinds of things are possible. Anyway, so Greg shows up to take the class. He doesn't need the class. He's been doing public speaking for years, right? For decades as a trial lawyer. But he likes the way I'm teaching. He shows up, he spots it. There's some things he's really liking about what he's learning. And so quickly, first time we have a breakout where it's just the two of us, he says, hey, NLP for lawyers, right? And I was just like, oh my God, of course, take the application, put it right there for the people who need it. They don't need to become experts in it. They need to know how to use it, right? For themselves. They're communicating for a living all day. And so then he talks me into writing a book, and then we realize the book is actually much bigger than lawyers. It's for everyone, right? And then, and we're doing trainings for lawyers, certainly, the two of us. But, and I've taken it in my own direction to do NLP for dads because I'm a dad and I love being a dad. And so programs for dads are getting up and running. But we realized that NLP needed to be applied and it needed to be taught in a simple way where people who don't have background aren't going to be therapists and coaches, or it's helpful for them certainly, but in my opinion, but so Greg shows up and he's just got like this way of talking about what's important to include, what people need, why they need it, right? What works for him and doesn't. He's so great about being generous with me and clear about letting me have my lane and telling me, the freedom I've got on a regular basis. And so what this really exemplified for me was, you see, there are these set of foundational beliefs in NLP. We call them the presuppositions. These things we invite you to presuppose are true in all situations. They're not controversial things, but you can learn to actually take them on as core beliefs. And that makes a huge difference. I'll just mention one and you'll see, oh, okay, sure, that makes sense. So one of them is this one that I shared, which is that there's a world in which it makes sense. Or in other words, every behavior, has a positive intention, right? There is something positive motivating it. There was some way in which it made sense. Another one is that, so I should step back for a moment and just say, there's kind of three chunks of tools you kind of learn in the, you might say, NLP curriculum, right? In the change curriculum, at least the way that we bring it to people. And that's a set of beliefs that create this mindset that enable you to go in and change yourself much more frequently and quickly, as well as help others. Then there's specific tools for understanding somebody's world, mental world. And then there's specific tools for helping to make shifts and experiment with changes or invite people to experiment with changes. So kind of three chunks. And, so in the book, there's these 28 different chapters, 28 different tools. Sounds like a lot, but there's these three chunks. And so one of these kind of core beliefs is that we talk about how if it's not working, try something else. Right. And now you think about grit and, stick-to-itiveness and willpower and sure, persistence has its place in certain contexts. But it's not just about trying harder. It's trying something else, right? It's recognizing I just did something. It didn't work. That doesn't mean I'm a failure.
Right.
I'm experimenting. I'm playing around, right? This is exciting. I'm taking action in the world. Think about one of my kids is 3 right now, the youngest one. He's really experimenting with language. And you see him, he's totally just like out there saying the wrong words and the wrong conjugations and everything. He's experimenting with communicating, and he's not beating himself up if he didn't get the right words like an adult often does. Instead he tries it and it's like, okay, that sort of communicated. It didn't quite, or he got some good feedback and, he learns in a sec. And so then next time he's doing it differently, but that wouldn't happen if he didn't try it first. So Greg here is showing up with something different for me. And so I've learned I have the most to learn and grow if I experiment with that.
Yeah.
So he shows up with a certain idea or an attitude. It's like, oh, wait a second. He's different from me. Let me show up and really be present with this.
Josh, as you're talking, I'm thinking about something that that people often speak to, but they don't necessarily understand. And I think you're touching upon it right now in a different way. There's a central idea in NLP that how we experience the world is not the same as reality, right?
Yes.
And so a 3-year-old's reality is very different than even a 5-year-old's reality, or a 12-year-old's reality, or a 30-year-old's reality. So, why does that matter when we're trying to change ourselves or influence others?
Sure, sure. And since you mentioned age and example of kids, an example came to my mind right away. So one of my kids was struggling with, it was an assignment, had to make a decision, right? Do I do Saturn or Neptune for my assignment? And it's going on. Days are going by. It's like he's still struggling to make this decision, and on the outside, we're like, just pick one, right? Come on. It's like, you're going to get the same stuff out of it, right? Just pick one. We're thinking this. And then internally getting a little frustrated, like, come on, right? And in a work context, we have people too who aren't taking that step, right? And it's just like, come on already, just do it, just pick one. I don't care, just get going, right? And we also, like, he would tell us about how he had asked the teacher again what they thought, which one, and so we're imagining the teacher being kind, but also thinking, come on already, right? And so finally, then, and this is so funny. This happens. The same story happens again and again. I'm living my life, and then it dawns on me, like, oh, why don't I use something I know from NLP, right? And so it was this kind of idea. So I'm like, okay, wait a second. Let me really get into his mind. His reality is different from my reality. What is his reality, right? And so part of it, I just started to imagine, but then it led me to ask the right questions once I'm in there, because I'm like, well, what doesn't make sense to me? So I'm getting in there, and I'm like, okay, wait a second. This is a big decision for him. Like, a project that's going to last for weeks, right? This is the only time he's ever so far studied a planet. Like, this is the planet. This is his planet, right? He's going to be working on this for a while. Like, this is his thing. Like, and so it's like, okay, great. I'm getting that, but I still don't get, like, he must have some interest in one or the other. Like, what's going on? So then I become aware of what might be
Right.
and I become curious. And so this is where I'm saying you learn how to be empathic. Now I know what to be curious about. And NLP gives me some great tools for how to ask questions too. So to notice what to be curious about and how to ask questions. Like, how specifically are you going about making this decision? So NLP helps me recognize there's a decision. Well, that's not a thing. It's actually a verb that's been turned into a noun, a decision. How are you deciding? So I can turn that back into how specifically are you deciding? And I discover he's trying to work out the balance between two values that he really wants to study Saturn because it's so interesting, but he wants to be different from the other kids, and everyone's choosing Saturn, right? So he has this value of wanting to stand out and be different, and then this value of wanting to do what really calls to him,
And
right?
how old is he, Josh? How old is he?
He's 10. He's 10.
Okay.
And this is an adult struggle, right? We all have these things, but once you
Right.
get into it, you're like, oh, I get it now. That is a tough challenge. And then I'm able to meet him where he is, right? Which is something that NLP will encourage. And
Yeah.
of course, with emotional intelligence and empathy, that's what you're talking about. You have to meet someone where they are before you can get them to follow. You
Right.
go from where they are to where you want to go, not from where you are to where you want to go. So then we're able to say, oh, okay, tough decision. I have some life advice about this kind of decision. Do you want to hear it, right? Yes, please, Daddy, right? And then before we knew it, Daddy, I made a decision.
Uh-huh.
You
Which
know,
did he pick?
Saturn.
Saturn. Okay,
Yeah.
because that's where the passion was. Well, and also from the, psychologists talk about the theory of mind, which is exactly what you're saying. It's empathy. How do I get into what their reality is?
Yes, but how do you do it, right? Everybody says you should, but how? How do you
All right.
actually do it? And this is how. Right?
All right, so go ahead. So you did talk, so let's get into some of the hows, because I think, both Kathy and I, these are the tips and tools we'll talk about at the beginning of the show. And then maybe we can tie that to some of the presuppositions or some of the foundational beliefs. So let's say for that an example, so what will be some of the how questions between Saturn and is it Saturn and Jupiter or Saturn and
It was Neptune in this case.
Neptune?
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah.
Right.
So yeah, just as an example. So so take us through some of the questions that our audience, or many of them are leaders, but also coaches. What would
Yeah.
you say are examples?
Yeah, yeah. So let's say you've got somebody who's here's a few language patterns that you can start noticing today.
Okay.
Whoever you are in conversation, I invite you to just kind of notice. Um, so you can do the one I just mentioned, which is somebody says, we have to make a decision, right? Or we need to work on this relationship, right? They're saying something that's like, wait, what? That's not a thing. I can't actually picture that. That's like they've turned a verb into a noun, and it makes it feel stuck, like it's just a thing, right? But it really is a verb. So you just say how specifically, or if somebody says like, this is making me so upset. Okay, wait a second. There's a cause and effect there. How specifically? So you learn to recognize, I don't understand how. That's all you got to do. And then you say how specifically, and you'll figure out how to finish the sentence. So there's one set of
And so you're
questions. The
you're
how
you're making
specifically.
more salient the whole situation, which is then a behavior that has all kind of links to it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so once you're getting into the process or the action, if it is actually one that you're talking about, and that word specifically, it's interesting. You'd think you wouldn't need to say it, but it often helps people get more specific somehow, right? It does. You just and then you really get into, and the kind of the key piece is to keep coming back to, does it make sense to me? Right? So I'm trying to get into your mental model, imagining if I were you, does it make sense to me? Here's another one. Somebody says, oh God, I really need to get to this, get back to these people, or I really should be getting back to them, right? I need to, right? That often represents a relationship that someone has to the task. You can think of something right now that each of you can think of it, anyone listening or watching can think of it. What's something where you think, oh God, I really need to do that. I should do that. I can't believe I haven't done that yet, right? And just call that to mind. When you hear that, you can wonder, does that reflect a relationship to the task that's kind of limiting, that's making it hard? Is there some limiting belief there that like this is an unpleasant thing and I have to force myself to do it? Because we all know, even if you have to force yourself to do something, you're not gonna, even if you do it, you're not gonna do it that many times. It's not gonna be a habit, right? So you can ask a question like, what would happen if you did it? Because what that does is it moves somebody, it gets them past that point of just being stuck with this thing. Okay, what would happen? And you don't know. Like it might be like, well, actually it wouldn't be such a big deal. Or it would be really hard, but I could survive it. Or it's like, well, it's a risk.
Yeah.
It's a big risk. Great. Now you've surfaced something to be curious about that you can really get into where you can help. Just that simple question, what would happen if you did? Right? And
So
that, yeah.
it sounds like there's something here about having, as you're saying, I guess in the book, a well-formed outcome. There has to be a relationship to the action that creates an outcome that you're looking to have. Because I think what's happening here, and I just want to help our audience out a little bit. You and Relly come from a different world than I do. I'm a behavioral scientist for special forces and special ops, and I coach law enforcement. And my programs are to help law enforcement learn how to be coaches. And I can tell you right now, I can hear them struggling with this conversation. Like I can hear
Okay.
them, they're in pain right now. This is like way too esoteric,
Too complex, too
too
detailed.
complex, too
Yep.
detailed. So
Great. So
I want to,
let's,
yeah, bring it up a level. And so here's what I'm hearing on their behalf. So we are trained as human beings by our very nature to fix things. Everything needs to be repaired. It's an underlying current in everything that we do. And we think of human beings as things that need to be repaired. And so, unfortunately, a lot of people go at a relationship to a thing, whether it's an action, let's say paying a bill, or having to have an exchange with someone to get the bill paid. And all I'm driving at here is, when we think of whether it's the action or it's the experience of that process that makes us feel uncomfortable, if we can just pause and listen to what it is that's creating whatever we're feeling, whether it's that high conflict or high emotional moment, and recognize that it creates something in us that needs attention. That's it. That's the practical way of looking at it, I guess. Am I making sense to you guys?
What I would say is notice when you're about to do something that feels hard or uncomfortable, right? And what you can do at that point is just say, thank you, feelings. Now I know there's something that needs attention, right?
Mhm.
And then, as you said, if you pause, you can start to figure out what that thing is. And we can talk about some easier ways to do that. But yes,
Fantastic.
yeah. Notice
All right.
that. That's the starting point.
So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to kind of zero in with Josh to see, because we only got so much time. We're going to pull out some of these gems that he's got in there from the book. So you've been listening to Leadership Development News, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practice of Top Performers. Josh Davis is who we're talking about today, and his website is www.joshdavisphd.com. We're talking about his book with Greg Promashkin, and you can get a hold of that at nlpdifference.com. The difference that makes a difference, the famous from Gregory Bateson. So what are those small things that you can do differently? Josh, you mentioned some of the foundations, and maybe if you can share one, and it also sounds like in each of your chapters, then there's some actions they can take. So maybe what's one that you'd like to share, and then some actions, going back to what Kathy said, people can grab onto, and then we obviously encourage them to get your book.
Yeah, yeah. So here's one that love to share in terms of one of those foundational beliefs. And then in terms of a tool, Kat, you mentioned the pacing and leading. And so let's get to that. And that's one
Okay.
that people can use in the moment. There's
Right.
like a high stakes thing happening, and it's really, really key. So in terms of a foundational belief, now this one is probably the most counterintuitive for many people at first, which also means that because it's the most different, it probably is the most to learn. But the idea is this: the meaning of your communication is the response you get. So in
Mm.
other words, how your message lands matters more than what you meant, right? So
Yeah.
you're communicating with someone. What would happen if you were operated in a way where it's like whatever their behavior is, that's what I just communicated, right?
Yeah.
So if you're with someone, you mentioned the law enforcement situation, you approach someone and then they get more aggravated. Well, what if I take in my mind that I just communicated to them that they should be actually getting agitated, that they need to do this somehow, right? What if that's my attitude when I'm showing up? I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying who's right. We'll never know, right? And you can argue about that all you want, but what's useful? Is it going to be more useful for you? And you can think about a situation you have, right, where the communication, right, you need to communicate with someone, right? You're gonna be interacting. You expect maybe it's an awkward feedback conversation. Maybe you need to tell someone to change something. Maybe you're gonna need to be confronting someone out there in the street, right? There's something where it's going to be uncomfortable for you, perhaps. You're not sure how it's going to go. And I would invite you right now to, like, with that situation in mind, think about one way it could go wrong. Now, what if you took responsibility for that? Not blame, but you said, I have some influence over how that turns out. Somehow I communicated that that was the thing to do.
Yeah.
I'm with the kids, they're fighting, teasing with each other, and they're making too much noise, and we're in a public venue, and I want to hear what's happening. I turn to them and I'm like, hey, you guys need to keep it down. We can't be doing this here. I want to hear what's happening. Turns out they start teasing more, right? And there's more loudness. Well, guess what? If I actually think about it, I just communicated, Daddy's not going to be here to help. He's focused somewhere else and he's mad. And you both know that when Daddy's mad, he's less useful. So you need to fend for yourselves, which means what? Tease more, right? It's like if I take on that attitude, you can see that there is some very useful stuff to it. Is it true? It's not necessarily my fault, but it's certainly believable that I did communicate that, right? That some way I didn't mean to. But if I take on that attitude,
Yeah.
wait a second, something's happening. I somehow communicated that that's right. What did I do? It's going to lead you somewhere new.
Yeah.
So the meaning of your communication is the response you get. Act as if that was true.
Yeah.
And you suddenly, so many communication issues dissolve and you don't
Yeah.
get as triggered. You don't get as angry.
Yeah.
You don't just like lose control and you don't start making meaning out of it that, oh, I'm being disrespected and so forth.
That's beautiful. And I think I've talked about similar things. You got 100% for the communication. And I think what you're saying, are you taking 100% for the impact of that? I mean, we take 100% for the communication. Oh, of course I said it. Okay. I said it over and over. But
Yeah.
what you're
And they
saying,
should take some responsibility too. Of course they should.
yeah.
But is it useful
It
to,
didn't use it. And
right?
and so that whole idea of taking responsibility for the impact, not a little bit, but 100%, so that you can make those small differences.
Mm-hmm.
You said something that I find a little curious, and that is, what's the difference between influence and then manipulation?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in my opinion, manipulation is when you're trying to make someone do something against their will,
Right.
right? That isn't good for them, right? I know with kids sometimes it's good for them and they don't, right? So that you might need to kind of set up that construct. But I think that is about the intent. And if you discover that it comes across that way, then it's time to repair that, right? And I do believe you can always recover, that you can always rebuild rapport, you can always recover and rebuild trust. And it may be hard, but you can. If if you are manipulating someone, like trying to coerce, get them to do something one time, it tends to be a transactional thing and it tends to break trust and becomes harder to actually interact with them in the future, even if you got away with it the one time. So, it's very rare that we just have these one-off interactions, right? So, if you're feeling like this is manipulative, then I'd pause, notice that feeling, right? Okay, what's going on for me? Is this just that I have wanted to stay away from anything that could be construed that way? Or what do I actually believe, right? Am I helping this person or not? Am I trying to? And ultimately, over time, that does work out. If you are trying to help the other person, you can't change someone. They have to want to
Right.
do it. You can't change their thoughts, their behaviors, anything. They have to want to do it. They have to choose to do it. They have to go along with it. So if you're tricking them one time, they're going to know. They're going to figure it out at least pretty quickly. And that's what I would call manipulation. If you look at the kind of the presuppositions of NLP, I think if you're getting to the point of manipulation, it's not NLP, right? Because you're not following these presuppositions, right? You're not this idea that every behavior has a positive intention, or that I really want to compassionately understand your world, right? Or that I, have full respect for where you're starting from, right? Or that, it's just like all of these things that are just like, that's how you build an open, lasting relationship where you really can help somebody change where they want to change. So if it's manipulation, it's a
Right.
one-off transactional thing that isn't, I would say it's not NLP anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And often I would say, is it good for the person? Is it good for the person who's communicating it? Is it good for our world? Kind of the three goods, and expand that. It's not going to be manipulation,
Right.
because in one of them, manipulation wouldn't be good for one of those key stakeholders.
Hmm.
So before we end, one more kind of key tool that someone could do in their day-to-day communication?
Yeah, yeah. So this idea of pacing and leading. Um, so um, in the book, we talk about it as meet the other person where they are before you try to get them to follow you.
Yeah.
And if you just think in simple terms of like directions, right? I'm trying to tell someone how to get to your house. You can't just say, here's my house, right? You have to be able to start. Like even if they just use their GPS, the GPS is saying, where are you starting from? Because that will matter, right?
Huh.
Unless I know that, I can't tell you how to get there, right?
Yeah.
So
Here's my
psychologically,
address. It's very simple. Here it is. This is the address.
right,
It's easy. Just follow the address. Yeah,
right.
I've been there. And then people are plugging in the address, and what they're not taking into consideration is
Right.
that a Google will take you one way, the Apple Maps will take you another way, and if you're not specific, very specific, you'll wind up in Japip. And I think what you're describing here is what happens to a lot of people
Yeah. Yeah.
on their way to a conversation, right?
Yeah,
I think,
exactly. Like I might be talking to someone and it's like, that's weird. So, you're telling me that, you really want to, grow your business, right? You're saying like, it's time. I'm at this point in my life. I'm like in mid 50s and like I've had some real success. And, it's like, I want to, it's time for me to just step into it and like make it this bigger thing that's, can run on its own. I'll step back. It's like, okay, you've been telling me that, right? I get that. And I could tell you how to do it. Like, there's all these people who have done it and there's all these steps that people have. And this is a well-worn path, but you're not doing it, right? And so, we start getting, well, where are you starting from, right? Okay, so part of it is, well, there are these fears like I could end up losing everything, right? Well, for some people, they enjoy the excitement of the ride, and that's fine. But for other people, losing everything, well, what's everything? There's going to be some either beliefs or capabilities or an identity thing. So talking to someone recently about this kind of thing, it was what ultimately came, we started exploring that. Well, where are you starting from? And they're starting from a place of, you know, I am, a good father and a responsible adult because I am stable and I have created, right? And it's like, yeah, well, guess what? Guess why you haven't taken a big risk, right? Because then you'd have to change your identity. But then we don't have to stop there. It's like, okay, in what ways are you a even greater father when you take this risk now, given your current circumstances? Right. And so then we really can, but you've got to address where they're starting from. And you can also, I'd love if I can do one more example of this, because this is like in the moment kind of thing. A lot of times people are like frustrated, and the natural thing is to say, okay, calm down, calm down, calm down, right? You got to just calm down. And what do you do when somebody says you need to calm down? Right? It's like you want to explode. And you might be a very well, like emotionally very intelligent person who can somehow manage to control yourself in that moment, but you are mad inside, right? You're not listening. You're not there. Join them. Join them in their experience, in their energy, right? If they're talking loud, join them for a little bit. Right? It's actually the opposite of what you might expect to be like, this is really frustrating, right? You don't have to say like, yeah, I'm dumb and I made a mistake if you don't agree, but it's just like, yeah, like you're really mad right now. You feel like this is completely unfair, right? So you join them with their energy.
Right.
You show them, I respect your reality right now. That's
Yeah.
what it does. And then they start to listen. They're like, I can trust you because you respect my reality. You care what my reality is. You're hearing me. And there's lots of research that when people feel
Yeah.
heard,
Yeah.
they respond, right? So that's where you got to start. You meet them where they are.
And I
Then you
think
can, yeah.
that's that matching and mirroring that NLP kind of, started off. I mean, today we're talking about empathy, but it
Yeah.
is really tone of voice, posture, all those kind of things, so that in their brain they go, "Ooh, this person's just like me." That's
Yeah.
kind of, you want that kind of connection, and then yes, you can kind of lead elsewhere.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so Josh, you said
Yeah,
there's an AI tool that we want to
yeah.
get in before we. Uh,
Oh, yes. So if I'm not available or Greg's not available to talk to, if you want, you can ask the book. So Greg has created this wonderful tool at nlpdifference.com where you can just say, "Hey, book, I have this situation. What should I do?" Or is there a question I could ask myself? Or how should I approach it? Or whatever, and it just gives you answers from the book.
from the book.
So
Beautiful.
yeah, so have a look at that.
And it's on that website.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, give us the website again.
nlpdifference.com.
Cool.
Yep. nlpdifference.com.
Man, this went fast today. Really
Right.
fast. Yeah. So we have to unfortunately say goodbye. And gosh, I'm sure we can find reasons to have you back, Josh. This has been fun, and I enjoy
I would love
listening to
that.
you.
Yes.
I'm sure it's going to be a test for the audience to really find nuggets for each of the kinds of people we work with out there, whether they're, just the everyday leader and the team member, or the law enforcement professional, or the legal mind, or those beautiful healthcare professionals. But I think there's something for everybody in your book, Josh, and hats off to you and Greg for putting it together for us. Relly, anything you want to add
Yes.
before we
So
sign off?
we're hoping with our podcast that we now have been doing for 20 years
Oh my God, 20
that this
years?
this is a little difference that can make a difference. If you're interested in some more stuff, we have some free tools at my website, drrellynadler.com. Why we all need coaching, which is what Josh is doing, Kathy's doing, and I'm doing. So thank you, folks, for listening in to Leadership Development News. Continue to tune in to tune up your performance.